The glass hit the floor before she did, a crystalline punctuation that felt louder than the scream that followed. We were mid-toast. Warm light, low jazz, a circle of faces leaning in like a constellation around mine. The waiter had just poured the second round. My son had his hand on my shoulder. My granddaughter was trying, with the fierce solemnity of a 10-year-old, to say something wise into the microphone. Then a chair scraped, a splash of champagne, and the world fractured. Her body folded, as if someone had cut a string. She lurched forward, hands clawing at air, then clawing at her throat. The napkin that had been tucked into her lap slid off, ribbons of cloth fluttering like white flags. A sound no one wants to hear filled the room. Not a word, not a cough, but the wet, choking rattle of someone fighting for a breath that wouldn't cooperate. Plates crashed. Silverware tinkled like tiny, accusing chimes. Someone shoved past me, the buzz of conversation collapsing into one long, horrified note. I stood because the room expected me to move and because my knees remembered how to. My pulse did not race. It was a curious thing, the mind's odd economy under pressure. While everyone else flailed, I catalogued. The sound of the crash, the angle of the lamp, the way the light caught the broken glass and threw it back in jagged diamonds across the tablecloth. The smell. Not the sharp metal tang of blood, not the cloying sweetness of a syruped poison you see in thrillers, something medicinal and faint, under everything else. A chemical breath that did not belong to celebration. Her lips were frothing when she hit the carpet. Not theatrical foam, but the awful, biological glitter that makes you forget to breathe. Her eyes rolled back slowly, white around the edge like onion skin. Someone tried to tilt her head. Someone else was already on the phone. Chairs scraped as people jostled for space, then shrank away when the paramedics barked, professional and clean and very late in the story. My son, my boy, was shouting, the syllables jagged, meaningless. His face was a map of shock and a smear of something else I couldn't read from across the table. Calculation, maybe, or the sudden, brittle freeze of someone who has seen the plan wobble. "Call an ambulance," someone cried. "Is she?" The rest of the sentence died against the din. My granddaughter, tears streaking her cheeks, clung to my apron because in the end children know where safety is supposed to be, and I felt that someone would be expected to be shaken, to tremble, to collapse into grief. Instead, I found myself watching the little details that tell the truth. The way her glass was placed, the slight chip on its rim where I'd set it down, the smear of a pale residue at the lip, the angle of the bottle left on the server's tray. People call it morbid curiosity. I call it experience. Years in the room where people lie for money and others lie for love sharpen the eye. Her husband, my son, was at her side in 2 strides and then 3, talking to her and pantomiming concern as if on cue. His hand trembled when he reached for her, and I watched that tremor like a ledger entry. Someone had to do the sensible things first. Check the airway, keep the head tilted, clear the mouth, call for help. I did them. I called the emergency number myself, because it was faster that way. There is an odd calm in acting while the world is erupting, an effective oxygen that circles the chest and steadies the hands. The restaurant staff were organized into a flurry of apologies and practicalities. Placemats folded, champagne bottles whisked away, a manager mouthing something to my son that I couldn't hear. Cameras in the corner of the private room, small black pinholes, blinked like indifferent witnesses. Their presence used to make me uncomfortable. Now I welcomed them. The recorder of what had actually happened is often the most honest thing in the room. Between breaths, a realization landed like a stone. That glass was not meant for her. My mind spelled it out the way an accountant writes a closing. Not guesswork, but balance. The chip in the rim was the one I always preferred. My bad habit of using a particular glass at dinners because it felt familiar in my hand. She had reached for that glass. She had lifted it to her lips. But the hand that should have touched it, my hand, resting, relaxed on my lap, had not. I had not raised it at all. The scene clenched, then unfurled. Misdirection, the classic sleight of hand. Something had been meant for someone else. I could have shouted then. I could have pointed, made the room a courtroom with one sentence. Screaming acquittal or accusation would have been dramatic. It would have been satisfying in the short term. Instead, I swallowed my surprise because the best way to catch a clever lie is to keep the truth in reserve until you have the proof. Let them believe the chaos you gave them. Let them panic. Let them play the part they're practiced for. The most dangerous people are the ones who expect you to react like everyone else. The paramedics arrived, breathing antiseptic efficiency, hands moving with trained calm. Monitors flashed. I let them work. I let them make the temporary stage of life and death their own, because it kept the eyes off things I needed to see. As they lifted her onto the stretcher and rolled toward the exit, the crowd parted into a corridor of soft faces and frightened whispers. My son walked with them a step, then turned back to me, his expression curdled with worry, and something else, a flicker of calculation that I caught the corner of and kept for later. They slid the doors shut behind the ambulance, and for a suspended heartbeat, the world contracted to the dim hum of the restaurant and the low sobbing that threaded through the room. You could have cut the tension with a spoon. It tasted like iron now in the back of my throat. When the staff set the table back into a semblance of order, a champagne flute trembled by the candlelight, unbroken but wounded, the residue at its lip now glaring like an accusing smudge. That should have been the end of it. That should have been a medical emergency and a bad night to be remembered. Except because stories that go viral always have an except. There was a history behind that chipped rim, a familiarity in the way my people moved that suggested intent. There was a sequence, laid in quiet steps, that had to be understood. I could not let this slip into some awful, explainable accident. 2 hours earlier, I said aloud, though no one asked me to. The words felt like a scalpel, clean and deliberate. The room and its noise rewound in my head, the laughter folding back into itself, the waiter still polishing the glasses. I could already see them smiling, talking, plotting perhaps without understanding that they were being observed. The present unspooled, and in my mind the scene cleared. The beginning, the small kindling that had turned into a fire. 2 hours earlier, the room had been full of small mercies. We'd reserved the private dining room at Mazarine, soft linen, the sort of low chandeliers that make everyone look forgiving in photos. The table was a long, forgiving oval. The candles were new and hand-dipped, the scent a gentle lemon that suggested celebration rather than extravagance. My son had booked the corner where the light was flattering. He'd brought my favorite flowers, peonies that still smelled like spring. And my granddaughter had insisted on a glittered crown, the sort you buy for small monarchs who like to rule the dessert cart. In that moment, the world felt hand-shaped around me, comfortable and right. I remember the sound of that first clink of crystal as if it were a memory from another life. Soft, respectful, a sound that says we have arrived at a small, important agreement for the evening. To you, my son said, voice thick with something I wanted to name gratitude, but that also carried the tired edges of his 39-year-old workweek. He placed his hand over mine as if the warmth would transfer, as if proximity could stitch whatever frayed corners his life had. He'd always been dramatic, charming, a little too ready for theatrics. He had the features of the boy who once left me dandelion bouquets on the kitchen table, the same crooked smile and the same honest eyes when he wasn't trying to make them do tricks. Jessica, his wife, new to our rituals but eager, moved through the room like she had somewhere else to be. That was my first small puzzle. She'd been there for 8 years, but she still possessed the restless speed of someone who feels she must perform to belong. She wore white that night, an almost surgical kind of neatness, hair pulled back, so every expression was on display. "Let me handle the toasts," she said when the server stepped away, her voice the precise pitch of someone who has rehearsed concern. She wanted the microphone. She wanted the moment. I remember the way she touched my arm when she moved past me, that fluttering, practice squeeze people employ to demonstrate intimacy on demand. The other guests blurred into watercolor. Old friends from neighborhood book club, a colleague who'd helped me with a deal a decade ago, the neighbor who always brought a fruit tart. They laughed at the safe jokes and told stories that smoothed like warm hands over a quilt. My granddaughter stood on her chair and announced that being 70 meant you could finally eat dessert first if you wanted. Someone at the far end of the table laughed too loudly. The server poured. The music was a low piano. It was the kind of scene people imagine when they think of happiness. And yet, within that pleasant choreography, certain small things landed like pebbles. Jessica kept moving the bottle toward me with a care that felt deliberate. She adjusted my napkin twice in the first 15 minutes. She hovered when I reached for anything on the table. Not the hovering you see from a doting daughter-in-law, the hovering that smells faintly of calculation. Once, when I reached for a fork, she made an offhand joke about my delicate hands and smiled in a way that didn't reach her eyes. I wrote that down in my head as one of those ordinary small things families get wrong and then correct with time. Then there were the other little anomalies. My son smiled, but his smile met his phone more often than my eyes. He excused himself to take a call and spent too long outside the door, speaking in a tone I recognized from his college days when he negotiated for favors. A neighbor mentioned, casually, how stressed the housing market had been, and Jessica's fingers tightened around her wine stem for a heartbeat that tasted like worry. My granddaughter passed a slice of cake to her father, and I watched him accept it with bare politeness and a longer, private pull away. The kind of private distance that gets people into trouble. The dinner rolled on like a well-rehearsed play. Toasts arrived like props, rose-colored and honest-sounding. Jessica toasted to family with the advertised sincerity of someone who knows to say the expected words. People raised their glasses and smiled into the camera. The server refilled flutes with a practiced hush. I caught a glint of metal. A small, flat, vial-like object half hidden under Jessica's clutch as she set her purse down. It was the kind of thing you notice when you spend a lot of time reading faces and the places people keep their tricks. Maybe it was nothing, I thought. Maybe it was breath mints. Or maybe I was simply sharpening paranoia from reading too many courtroom dramas. I remember a quiet little exchange that afternoon that no one else would have felt to notice. Jessica leaned in and, with the economy of a practiced social operator, said to my son, and Charlotte, my granddaughter, misheard and whispered, "Grandma's going to get you to finally cut back." And the private half-smile they shared was the kind of intimate thing lovers have when they agree on something in code. It might have been nothing, but it lodged at the back of my throat like a flavor I couldn't place. By the time dessert arrived, the mood was almost affectionate. Chocolate mousse for me, coffee for the men, a small lemon tart for Charlotte. The cake stood in the center with its candles like a tiny lighthouse. The server set a silver tray down beside me and, in the small intimacy of the moment, asked if I wanted my usual flute, the one with the tiny chip on the rim. A foolish habit, I admitted the truth. I like the weight of that imperfect glass. It sits comfortably in my hand. I always use it, even when the staff brings something newer and less marked. They smile at that. People like comforting rituals. Jessica volunteered then, with too much lightness, to pour my glass. "Let me get that for you, Mom," she said, in that same practiced tone. Her fingers closed around the bottle, and, as she leaned over, the room seemed to compress toward that small movement. I watched her hands, always watch hands, because hands reveal what words hide. They were steady, but quick, the sort of steady that tells you someone has rehearsed their speed. She poured, and the flute filled with the pale fizz. She set the bottle down and smiled that familiar smile. There was applause, a clap or two. People are polite about birthdays, and the music swelled a hair. It would have been easy, in that flash, to let it be a tender gesture. My daughter-in-law carefully attending to me at my birthday dinner. The obvious story, the chosen story everyone prefers. But the smaller, quieter part of my brain, the part that remembers unreturned favors and thin ledgers, ticked. She was too helpful. She had a habit. She watched the way my hand settled around the familiar chip. There was a timing in the room now, like a metronome for a con, and everything else had to fit around it. That tiny, private hesitation settled on me like a cool cloth. I sipped my water instead and let the room move around me. No one noticed. No one would have thought to notice. I wasn't yet ready to speak, not that evening. You cannot accuse without evidence. You cannot explode without a script. So I smiled, and I joined the chorus of toasts, and I allowed the veneer of the night to stay intact while I filed those small anomalies away like receipts kept for a time when reckoning arrives. At the edge of the laughter, I tasted a different kind of anticipation, not the sweetness of cake, but a sharper, colder thing. The kind of anticipation that knows the next move will change everything. I excused myself under the soft pretense of needing a moment to stretch my legs. Birthdays at 70 come with certain courtesies. People expect you to rise slowly, to hold the edge of a chair, to move with the dignified carefulness of someone who has earned her aches. It makes you invisible in precisely the right way. No one pays attention to the elder easing herself away from the table. No one expects her to notice anything except the next slice of cake. Which is why no one noticed that I doubled back. The hallway leading to the private lobby had a mirrored panel that gave me a perfect view into the dining room without requiring me to be physically present in it. Reflection is an old friend. It shows you the truth when you're not supposed to be looking. And in that mirrored sliver of glass, the surface catching candlelight and soft motion, I saw Jessica do something that snapped everything into sharp, merciless clarity. She checked the door. Not casually, not the incidental scan of someone looking around a room, but deliberately. She angled her chin just enough to see whether anyone was returning. Her hand slipped into her purse, and when it emerged, it held something small. A slim, amber-tinted vial just like the one I'd glimpsed earlier. She palmed it like a magician palming a coin, confident, practiced, precise. For a single heartbeat, I stood motionless, breath tucked behind my ribs. Then came the movement that ended all doubt. She unscrewed the cap with a single twist and tipped the contents toward one glass. My glass, the chipped one. The one she knew I always used. A thin stream, almost invisible, poured into the pale champagne. She replaced the vial with equal speed, wiped the rim with her thumb, and straightened herself like someone adjusting a mask before turning around. There it was. The truth, small, silent, unquestionable. My pulse didn't quicken. My hands didn't shake. I felt the way I used to feel in courtrooms when I knew a witness had just said the sentence that would cost them the case. That cold, elevated stillness. A kind of throne room calm. She lifted the glass, cradled it as if offering me a blessing, and walked back toward the table. And in that exact instant I knew. She didn't know I was watching. She believed the stage was hers. Good. Actors perform best when they think no one sees the backstage ropes. I walked back in through the opposite side of the room, the side closest to the dessert cart. Everyone assumed I'd been gone a single moment. No one thought to track the path of a 70-year-old woman who'd simply paused to admire a painting on the wall. When Jessica saw me returning, she brightened like a spotlight. Mom. There you are. We were just about to toast again. Her voice was honey with a faint metallic aftertaste, that strain people get when they are suppressing urgency. She held the glass out to me, her smile stretched just a touch too wide. I accepted it. Warmly. Graciously. With the same performance she thought she was giving. As the room resumed its gentle chatter and my son began launching into another sentimental toast, Jessica leaned forward, as if eager to watch me drink first. She positioned her phone subtly, pretending to take a photo of the table, but angling it just enough so that the camera would capture my face. Important detail. The kind of detail you remember later. I lifted the glass slightly. Not to drink, but to introduce uncertainty. Then, with the clean choreography of someone who'd managed boardroom warfare for decades, I shifted my elbow lightly, drawing her attention toward the birthday cake as the server cut the first slice. Her eyes flickered. And in that flicker I set my glass down, right beside her mother's. Her mother, Patricia. Sweet, slightly absent-minded, always flustered, always grateful to be included. A woman whose backstory was woven with medications and herbal supplements and a medical history Jessica often cited whenever she needed sympathy points. Patricia had been talking to my neighbor, rambling through a story about her cat, entirely unaware that a glass, my glass, now stood beside her half-empty water goblet. Jessica looked back at me, expecting anticipation in my eyes. Instead, she found serenity. A warmth she didn't recognize. A softness no prey ever has. Confusion flickered across her face, the smallest fracture across a porcelain mask. Perfect. Then came the moment. The server moved around the table offering cake. People shifted. Chairs scraped lightly. And in the subtle choreography of movement and conversation, Patricia reached blindly for a drink. The nearest glass, the glass Jessica had prepared, with its tiny chipped rim. She lifted it. I watched Jessica inhale sharply, the way someone inhales when something unexpected happens in a game they thought they were controlling. She leaned forward, half a twitch of instinct, half a choke of panic. But Patricia was already sipping. Just a delicate, polite sip. She smacked her lips lightly. Oh, that's lovely. What kind is this? Her voice fluttered, soft, oblivious. Jessica's face went sheet white. My son saw it, or rather, he saw enough of her panic to register something wrong, though not enough to understand why. He touched her arm. You okay? She nodded tightly. Too tightly. Yes. Yes. I'm fine. Just warm. Warm. Always the amateur excuse. 5 minutes. 5 minutes is all it took. Patricia coughed lightly. Then again. Then harder. At first, the table ignored it. Older women cough. Allergies exist. Champagne bubbles irritate the throat. But then her hand trembled. And then she gripped the table's edge. And then her eyes widened. A sound tore from her throat. Not a cough this time, but a trapped, wet choking noise that stabbed the room's tranquility straight through the chest. Her body buckled. Cake fork flying. Water glass tipping. Chair leg screeching. Her breath slicing the air in ragged shards. People screamed. A waiter dropped a tray. Cutlery clattered like silver rain. Jessica shrieked. My son froze. Someone else yelled for help. And Patricia, poor, sweet Patricia, collapsed hard against the carpet, her arms spasming as foam gathered at the corner of her mouth. The exact symptoms Jessica expected to see on my face. The exact collapse she had prepared for me. Her horror was a performance. Her panic was real. My son knelt beside her, shouting for someone to call an ambulance. The restaurant staff scrambled, half-trained but desperate. My neighbors clutched each other. My granddaughter cried into my sleeve. And I stood there still, cold, steady, watching. My heart didn't gallop. My breath didn't spike. My hands didn't tremble. Instead, I observed something far more important. My son shooting Jessica a look. A short one. Barely a flicker. But laced with familiarity, like someone whose script had just gone very, very wrong. Not confusion. Not fear. Recognition. He knew something. And now I knew that too. Chaos swallowed the room. Paramedics rushed in. Voices blurred. Sirens wailed. Jessica sobbed louder than anyone else, but her eyes, those betraying, darting eyes, were locked on me the entire time, as if she needed to know whether I knew. I smiled at her. A soft, grandmotherly smile. The kind you give a naughty child who thinks they've gotten away with something. Because I had seen everything. And I had just opened the first door. In a house full of secrets. That she thought belonged only to her. What she didn't know, not yet, was that I had spent a lifetime surviving schemes far sharper than hers. And that the glass she meant for me was only the beginning. I didn't go to the hospital. Everyone else did. My son, pale and frantic, Jessica, visibly trembling. Even my neighbor offered to drive behind the ambulance. The staff rushed around collecting dropped utensils, sweeping broken glass into neat, careful piles, muttering apologies no one needed or heard. But me? I stayed behind in the empty, echoing dining room, standing in the same place where Patricia had collapsed moments earlier. The air still hummed with leftover panic, the scent of spilled champagne mixing with the sharp undertone of antiseptic from the paramedics' kit. A server quietly began clearing plates, avoiding my eyes like I might shatter too. I touched the chipped glass. The one meant for me. Still damp. Still cold. Still carrying the faint scent of citrus and something else, something metallic. An inexperienced hand would dismiss it as champagne's bubble bitterness. But I was not inexperienced. I had lived 7 decades around people who smile while they sharpen knives behind their backs, in boardrooms, in communities, in family gatherings. I knew the difference between coincidence and intention. And tonight was intention. I slipped the glass into my purse when no one was looking. Evidence matters. Always has. Always will. Then I paid for dinner, for everyone, because I wanted the restaurant manager to remember me as the calm, rational one, not the hysterical woman screaming about poisoning. Perception is a weapon when you play the long game. By the time I got home, my phone was buzzing with messages. Son, Mom, are you home? Are you okay? Jessica, please call me. I'm so scared. I don't know what happened to my mom. Neighbor, do you want me to come over? Restaurant manager, we are deeply sorry for the incident. I ignored them all. Instead, I walked straight to my home office, the same office where I had built my bookkeeping business from scratch, tracking numbers until I could see patterns in my sleep. That skill, that instinct for patterns came back roaring. I set the chipped glass on my desk, turned it slowly in the dim lamplight. Unmistakable. Residue on the rim. I opened my laptop next. Not Google. Too messy. I had better resources. Old forensic accountant friends. Retired toxicologists. People who owed me favors. I messaged one I trusted. If someone put a droplet of something bitter, metallic, non-odorous into champagne, what class of substances would that be? He replied within a minute. A lot of plant alkaloids. Digitalis derivatives. Oleander extracts. Things that can induce heart failure or neurological collapse. Why? I stared at the screen. I already knew why. I just wanted to see the words spelled out by someone else. I opened another folder on my desk, labeled Family Contributions. People would call it sentimental that I kept records of the help I'd given my son and his wife, but it wasn't sentiment. It was survival. Every dollar becomes a weapon eventually. Every loan becomes a history. Every act of generosity becomes a line in a ledger that may one day matter. I'd helped them plenty. Mortgage top-ups. A car down payment. Private school tuition for my granddaughter. Debt consolidation once. A temporary loan for Jessica's boutique. Another loan for unexpected home repairs. A final loan when my son's architecture firm struggled. Total? More than $160,000. All kindness. All willingly given. None ever fully repaid. But that wasn't the part that chilled me. The last entry, dated only 3 months ago, showed the biggest number yet. $45,000. Emergency business injection. I remembered his words. Just until we get back on our feet, Mom. We're almost stable again. But people who are almost stable don't show the kind of tight fear I had seen in my son's eyes when Patricia collapsed. People who are almost stable don't let their wives slip poison into a glass. Unless they are not almost stable at all. Unless their survival depends on your death. I dialed one person. Margaret Wynne. Retired private investigator. Widow. Sharp as a two-edged blade. And fiercely loyal, if she liked you. She picked up on the second ring. Sarah? Why are you calling me at 10 p.m.? Did someone die? Her bluntness was refreshing. Almost, I said. But not the right person. A beat of silence. I'm listening. We spoke for 20 minutes. I told her everything. Not dramatically, just factually. When I finished, Margaret exhaled. You think your daughter-in-law tried to kill you? No, I said quietly. I know she did. And you switched glasses. Yes. And the wrong person drank it. Yes. Margaret chuckled softly, admiration, not humor. You are a frightening woman, Sarah. I've been told. Fine. I'll run surveillance. Give me their addresses. Phone numbers. Emails if you have them. And Sarah? Yes. Don't confront them. Not yet. I wasn't planning to. Good. Because what you're describing isn't spur of the moment. That kind of poisoning? That's planned. That's prepared. And people who plan murder often plan phase 2. I closed my eyes. Phase 2. Of course. I didn't get to sleep that night. My mind stayed awake, revisiting every strange moment from the past year. Jessica helping with my medications 3 months ago. My son encouraging me to retire early. The sudden push for me to downsize my house. The talk about how big houses are dangerous for seniors. Jessica asking if I'd updated my will recently. My son suggesting I take a cognitive evaluation just for peace of mind. The brochure about a retirement home slipped into my mail last month. Pieces. Floating. Disjointed. Tonight they formed a picture. A plan. A timeline. A strategy. And now, I was an obstacle they needed to remove. The poisoning wasn't random. It was the finale of Act 1. They just didn't know the curtain hadn't dropped yet. The next morning, I took my coffee to the porch and opened my mail, a habit of routine that helps me think. Inside the stack, tucked between a utility bill and a birthday card, was a letter addressed in my son's handwriting. I opened it. Inside, a pamphlet for a luxury senior care facility, a brochure detailing memory care options, and a sticky note from my son. Mom, think about this. We'd feel better knowing you're safe. Safe. The word tasted like poison itself. I set it aside. More patterns surfaced throughout the day. Reveal 1. My bank sent an automated alert. Someone had tried to log into my online account from an unfamiliar device. Failed attempts 3. Reveal 2. Jessica's boutique Instagram showed expensive new inventory, jewelry pieces in the hundreds, maybe thousands. All posted within the last 6 weeks. Reveal 3. A voicemail from a payday loan service addressed to my son. Reveal 4. A neighbor mentioned seeing my son's car parked outside a financial consultation office earlier that week. The same office known for debt restructuring and asset liquidation counseling. Reveal 5. My granddaughter mentioned, innocently, Mommy said Grandma won't live alone for much longer. An innocent child should never reveal adult crimes. But they often do. By late afternoon, Margaret texted. Checked court databases. Your son and daughter-in-law are drowning in debt. Mortgage behind. Credit cards maxed. Business near collapse. Someone even tried applying for a HELIC increase last month, denied. Also, found a new life insurance policy taken out on you. 6 months old. Beneficiary, Jessica. I stared at the message for a long time. My birthday cake was still in the refrigerator. The frosting still pink. The candles still unused. I whispered to myself. They weren't desperate. They were prepared. A well-planned, elegantly timed financial murder. Kill me. Inherit everything. Pay debts. Save face. Move on. Clean. Efficient. Cold. They thought I would be emotional when I realized the truth. They didn't know who they were dealing with. I wasn't emotional. I was focused. Focused on the next move, my move. The game had begun. And unlike them, I didn't make amateur mistakes. They showed up at my house less than 24 hours after Patricia's collapse. I had barely finished my morning tea when I saw their car pull up. Far too early in the day for a social visit. Panicked people always arrive early. People with something to hide arrive even earlier. Jessica stepped out first, her face arranged into a composition of grief and worry. Anyone who didn't know better might have thought she was exhausted from crying. I knew she was exhausted from pretending. My son followed her, shoulders tight, movement stiff. His eyes were puffy, but not from tears. No, those were the eyes of someone who hadn't slept because the plan was falling apart. They stood on my doorstep, as if waiting for a curtain to rise. Mom, my son said, voice shaky. We were worried. We needed to check on you. Worried. Such a delicate word. Useful if you want to disguise control as concern. I'm fine, I said, opening the door, offering them the exact calm smile of someone with nothing on her conscience. Come in. Jessica rushed forward and hugged me, pressing her face into my shoulder as if trying to block her own expression from my view. She forgot one thing. I don't need to see someone's face to know when they're lying. Their body always tells the truth. Her body was trembling, not with sorrow, but with fear. Fear of what I knew. Fear of what I might know. Fear that the wrong person had drunk from the wrong glass. Good. Fear sharpens the stupid. Fear exposes the careful. They walked in as if entering a crime scene, which is ironic considering they created one. Jessica sat on the couch, twisting a tissue so fiercely the fibers tore. My son sat on the armchair across from me, elbows on knees, fingers steepled. The classic posture of someone preparing a speech. "Mom," he began, "yesterday shook us. It made us think about your safety." I almost applauded. He was following the guilt script perfectly. "Mom," he tried again, "you're at an age where a medical emergency could be really serious."
Ah, yes. Age.
The invisible fist used to knock elders into submission. Jessica chimed in, voice trembling at all the wrong beats. "We just want you to be taken care of. What if something happened when you were alone?" I sipped my tea. "I was alone last night," I said evenly, "and I survived just fine." She faltered, recovered, then reached into her bag. And out came phase 2 of their plan. A glossy folder with images of smiling seniors playing bridge, swimming in warm indoor pools, doing watercolor painting. A retirement home. A luxury memory care facility. A place that looks like a resort but functions like a cage. My son pushed it gently toward me. "Suncrest Haven," he said softly. "Top-rated. Safe. Comfortable. Staff always around. You'd love it." I looked down at the brochure. The cover read, "Where dignity meets care." What a beautifully sinister slogan. "And," he added, pushing his voice into what he thought was a convincing mixture of apology and duty, "their doctor does a full health and cognitive evaluation for new residents. Standard procedure. Cognitive evaluation. In other words, a professional opinion they could manipulate, a report they could use later to justify taking everything I own. A diagnosis that could place me under guardianship. Their coup disguised as care." Jessica dabbed at her eyes again. "I don't want to lose you," she whispered. A master manipulator always plays the emotional violin when logic starts slipping. My son leaned in. "Mom, you're 70. You've had dizzy spells. You've been forgetful lately." "Have I?" That was news to me. But this is how elder manipulation works. Tell someone they're declining often enough, and you hope they'll start believing it. I smiled softly. "Sweetheart, forgetfulness happens when people ask me to remember things I never cared about."
He blinked.
Wrong answer for him.
Perfect for me.
Jessica clasped her hands. "Please, just think about it. It's only because we care." Translation. "Please, sign the documents that give us control." I softened my face, an expression men mistake for vulnerability and women mistake for surrender. "I suppose," I said gently, "you might be right." Jessica shot a quick glance at my son, a spark of victory too bright to hide. He exhaled with visible relief. "Really?" he asked. "Yes," I said. "Maybe I do need help. Maybe living alone is too much." Jessica nodded eagerly, sliding closer. "I can schedule a tour," she said. "Tomorrow. Or even today." Their desperation had become visible now, an open wound of urgency bleeding through their careful smiles. "Let's take it one step at a time," I whispered. Inside, my mind clicked like a trap resetting. They believed I was falling for it. Perfect. Let them think they are brilliant. Nothing blinds a manipulator faster than their own ego. While I brewed another pot of tea, giving them a moment to whisper and rehearse their next line, I slid my phone onto the counter, screen down. Recording. People reveal everything when they think you're not listening. I heard Jessica whisper. "She's folding. Don't push too fast. Let her feel like she's choosing it." My son replied, voice low but shaking. "We need her to sign the medical consent and financial forms first. Without that." Jessica hissed. "She will. She's scared." Today rattled her. He didn't reply. Silence stretched, the kind that reveals cracks. I returned with the tea. The recording captured everything. Evidence. Concrete evidence. Suncrest has an on-site physician we can trust, Jessica said carefully. Too carefully. I raised an eyebrow. Oh, someone you know? A friend of a friend, she shrugged. He specializes in senior evaluations. I smiled. She meant someone willing to sign papers for money. Someone who could declare me incompetent if needed. Someone who would take their side. A professional accomplice. I pretended to consider. Maybe it's wise to have a full evaluation, I sighed. Just in case. Her relief was so palpable, it could have misted the air. My son looked exhausted. The kind of exhaustion that doesn't come from worry, but from fear of consequences. Mom, he said softly, we just want to do this before anything else happens. Before the window closes. Before Patricia wakes up. Before toxicology tests return. Before I talk to police. Before I change my will. Before I move my assets. They needed me to sign everything fast. Too fast. Someone who isn't desperate doesn't hurry. Someone who's planning something illegal does. I leaned back, looked between the two of them, and smiled with the kind of acceptance they'd been praying for. All right, I said, I'll tour Suncrest. And I'll sign whatever forms they need. Tomorrow. Jessica's relief was loud. My son's tension broke into a slow exhale. They thought they had won. They didn't know, not yet, that the documents I'd sign tomorrow wouldn't belong to them. By the time they left, whispering excitedly in the driveway, my plan was already halfway built. They believed I was stepping into their trap. They believed the power was shifting into their hands. They believed the poison attempt had frightened me into obedience. They had no idea I was documenting everything. They had no idea a private investigator was already tracking their finances. They had no idea that I had copies of the insurance policy they took out on me. They had no idea I'd already called a lawyer to prepare decoy documents. They had no idea they weren't orchestrating a takeover. They were walking straight into mine. And by the time the police arrived tomorrow, they would understand exactly who underestimated whom. They arrived the next morning dressed as if they were attending a bank meeting. Jessica wore an ivory blazer, too crisp for a casual visit, too intentional for an impromptu check-in. Her hair was perfectly sleek. She had makeup on despite her mother lying in a hospital bed. People who are grieving don't contour their cheekbones. My son wore a suit jacket he hadn't touched in years. His hands were shaking. He tried to hide it in his pockets, but I've known those hands since they were small enough to wrap around my thumb. Mom, he said stiffly, are you ready for the paperwork before we go to Suncrest? The script was unraveling already. Suncrest wasn't the first thing he brought up. The documents were. Desperation, again. Jessica pulled a manila envelope from her bag, thick, heavy, suspiciously official-looking. Her fingers hovered over it as though it held salvation. She didn't know it held her downfall. We printed everything you need to sign, she said, smiling too brightly. Just simple authorizations. Medical release. Power of attorney. Nothing complicated. Power of attorney. They couldn't help themselves. Greedy people rarely can. I gestured toward the dining table. Sit, I said sweetly. Let's review everything. They sat, eager, hungry, certain victory was minutes away. I brought out my paperwork. The stack neatly clipped, organized, professional. They didn't even notice the difference. I slid the papers toward them. Is this everything you need? I asked. Jessica didn't read a single line. She was too relieved, too excited, too certain that she had finally broken me. Yes, she breathed. Yes, this looks right. She pushed a sleek pen into my hand, a pen she must have imagined would be the key to her golden future. I signed every page, slowly, deliberately, letting the pen glide with the calm of a woman who had accepted her fate. Her shoulders dropped in relief. My son watched me with an expression I once mistook for concern. Now I realized it was the look of a man who had chosen loyalty sideways. Mom, thank you. This will help us take care of you. I nodded. Oh, I know. But here's the thing. The documents I signed weren't the documents they brought. My lawyer had prepared duplicates. Legally void, intentionally meaningless, watermarked with a trap that only a trained eye would notice. They had no power, no legal strength, no ability to give them control over anything. They were holding paper, not power. Jessica clapped her hands together in satisfaction.
Perfect.
Now, we can go to the evaluation at Suncrest.
She stood.
Eager to leave. Eager to move the plan along before anything could unravel. But I stayed seated. Actually, I said gently, there are a few people we're waiting for. My son blinked. Waiting for?
Who?
Oh, I said casually, you'll see. Their confusion simmered beautifully. Jessica sat back down slowly. Who exactly are we waiting for? I took a sip of water. Authority. A knock sounded on the door before the word even finished leaving my mouth. My son's face drained of color.
Who was that?
I didn't answer, because the answer walked in. The door opened. Detective Hernandez stepped in first, wide shoulders, serious eyes, and the calm confidence of someone who has seen every flavor of family betrayal. Behind him, a uniformed officer. Behind the officer, my lawyer, Mr. Kessler, carrying a thick folder. The air changed instantly. Jessica froze like a deer in headlights. My son swallowed hard, his throat bobbing like a child caught stealing. Sarah, Mr. Kessler said politely. We're right on time. Detective Hernandez nodded at Jessica. Mrs. Collins, we need to discuss an incident that occurred last night at Mazarine Restaurant. Jessica's face split into a rehearsed panic. My mother. Did something happen? Hernandez didn't blink. She's stable. And awake. Jessica sagged in relief. Too dramatic, too performative. Hernandez continued. And she's talking. Those 4 words hit like a sledgehammer. Jessica's face shifted, barely but enough. My son exhaled shakily, then tried to recover. Detective, this is all a shock. We don't know what happened to Patricia. Good, Hernandez interrupted. Then we'll help clarify. Mr. Kessler opened his folder. Shall we begin? Kessler placed the first item on the table. A printed toxicology report. Patricia's blood work showed atropine derivatives, he said calmly. Not found in champagne. Not found in the food. Jessica went still. My son's breath hitched. Detective Hernandez placed the second item. A still image from the restaurant's CCTV. Jessica looked at it. Her hand, holding the vial. Her hand, tilting it over the glass. Her hand, wiping the rim. The color drained from her face so fast, it was almost impressive. Hernandez slid forward another print. A zoom shot, her checking to see if anyone was watching. Next came the vial recovered from her purse, found by hospital staff when they searched her bag during intake. Then, the life insurance policy file, taken out 6 months ago. Beneficiary, Jessica. Reason, financial protection in case of unexpected fatality. Insured, me. Then, audio recording. My recording from the kitchen. Jessica whispering. She's folding. Don't push too fast. Let her feel like she's choosing it. My son whispering. We need her to sign the forms before anything else. The sound of their voices filled the room like poison. Jessica shook her head violently. This is out of context. I wasn't. Then Hernandez placed the final document on the table. The evaluation appointment Jessica scheduled. Listed reason. Assess cognitive decline. Prepare guardianship documentation. Guardianship. The word echoed. Jessica had planned to declare me mentally incompetent. My son had agreed. The entire room went silent. The thick, suffocating silence of truth unraveling. My son crumbled first. He buried his face in his hands. Mom. I'm so sorry. I didn't think, I thought it was the only way. Jessica erupted. You weren't supposed to drink it, she screamed before she realized what she'd admitted. The room froze. Detective Hernandez lifted a brow. So, you did put something in the glass. Jessica panicked. I know, that's not. She switched them? Kessler said softly. Yes,
She did.
Jessica turned to me with wild eyes. You knew. You knew what I put in there. Yes, I said. I did. And you let her drink it. You let my mother. I looked at her calmly. You intended to kill me. Her face twisted. Guilt, fear, rage all tangled. And then she lunged for her bag. Instinct, maybe grabbing for the one thing she thought could help her escape. The officer grabbed her instantly, pinning her arms before she could reach anything. She screamed, then sobbed, then screamed again. My son whispered, broken. Mom, please. I didn't know she'd actually.
Stop, I said. He did.
You both planned it. Every step. He wept into his hands. Jessica fought like a cornered animal as they cuffed her hands behind her back. Detective Hernandez nodded at me. Anything you'd like to add, Ms. Collins? I stood slowly, looked first at Jessica, the architect of this disaster, then at my son, the boy I raised, who had chosen greed over love. I took a breath and delivered the final blow. I switched the glasses on purpose. Jessica's scream pierced the room. My son stared at me, pale, shaking, unable to speak. I continued. I wanted to know how far you'd go. And now I know. Hernandez nodded to his officers. Arrest her. And place him under investigation. Jessica was dragged out the door, screaming my name. Not in victory, not in accusation, but in the raw, primal way a criminal screams at the person who outsmarted them. My son sat frozen, staring at the table. Mom, please. I turned away. The game was over, and they had lost. The house felt impossibly quiet once the police cars pulled away. The echo of Jessica's screams still lingered faintly, not because I cared, but because it was a sound that confirmed something final, something irreversible, something earned. For a long time, I just stood in the doorway, breathing in the stillness. The world outside hummed on like nothing had happened. A dog barked down the street. A car rolled past slowly. A neighbor watered her potted gardenias. Life, indifferent to drama, always moves forward. Inside my home, however, the air was heavy with aftershocks. My son remained seated at the dining table long after the officers left. He looked smaller than I had ever seen him, like the boy who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms, except now the storm was one he helped create. He lifted his head when he felt me watching him. Mom, he whispered. I didn't mean for it to go that far. There's something tragic about hearing a grown man try to shrink his crimes into accidental missteps. I sat across from him, deliberately not beside him. You helped her plan every step, I said softly. His eyes filled, spilling over. I thought it would fix everything. We were drowning. You always said you didn't want to be a burden. I am not a burden, I replied. You just convinced yourself that I was worth more dead than alive. He flinched. There was nothing more to say. When the officers came back later that afternoon, this time for him, he didn't fight, didn't run, didn't argue. He simply closed his eyes, stood up, and placed his hands behind his back. A simple gesture, quietly damning. I watched from the doorway as they led him away. That was the moment I allowed myself to feel it. Not rage, not triumph, but grief. Grief for the boy I raised. Grief for the man he chose to become. Grief for a loyalty he traded for debt and desperation. But grief is an ache, not a chain. It doesn't keep me from walking forward. In the week that followed, I cleaned my home like I was airing out not dust, but betrayal. I opened windows wide. I threw away every wilted flower from the birthday dinner. I scrubbed the dining table until it shone like a fresh chapter. Margaret, the retired PI, visited often. Poison, she said, shaking her head as she examined the chipped glass. Some people choose the dumbest path to salvation. We shared a laugh, small, dark, honest. My lawyer handled the legal labyrinth. Detectives handled the criminal side. And I handled myself, which was the part one could actually control. I cooked again. Slowly. I sat on my porch with my morning coffee like nothing had exploded. Neighbors stopped by with casseroles, gratitude, Pity or fascination? I wasn't sure. Either way, kindness is kindness. Peace returned,
Not loudly.
but steadily, like a room unclenching. 3 days later, there was a small knock at my door. When I opened it, my granddaughter stood on the porch clutching a stuffed rabbit and wearing the kind of sad, hesitant smile that breaks you in ways poison cannot. "Grandma," she whispered, "can I stay with you for a little while?" Her eyes were swollen. Her voice was small. Her world had shattered too. I wrapped her in my arms. "Of course, baby," I whispered. "You're always safe here." She clung to me like a lifeline. That night, she fell asleep in my bed, her tiny hand resting on my arm, gripping tightly, as if anchoring herself to a version of family that hadn't failed her. I stayed awake watching her breathe. Children deserve soft places to land. I would be hers, no matter what. In the days that followed, we rebuilt quiet routines. Pancakes in the morning, drawing in the afternoon, walks around the block at sunset, stories before bed. The house felt warmer with her in it. As if innocence, even wounded innocence, brought its own light. One evening, as I washed the dishes, I paused and looked at my reflection in the kitchen window. People say age makes you soft. They're wrong. Age gives you perspective. Age gives you strategy. Age gives you a backbone made of tempered steel. What my son and daughter-in-law underestimated wasn't my age. It was my clarity, my memory, my ability to see people for who they are rather than who I wished they'd be. And more than anything, they underestimated my will to survive. You see, surviving isn't just refusing to die. It's refusing to be diminished. They tried to erase me to save themselves. Instead, I saved myself. With patience. With intelligence. With experience sharpened from decades of navigating the complicated intersections of love and betrayal. My victory wasn't the arrest. It was reclaiming my life from the people who believed I didn't deserve to keep it. On Sunday, my granddaughter and I planted a row of pink peonies in the backyard, my favorite flowers, ones I hadn't appreciated enough until now. She asked, "Grandma, are we going to be okay?" I smiled. "Oh, sweetheart," I said, brushing her hair back gently. "We already are." The sun dipped low. The garden smelled like new beginnings. And for the first time in a long time, I felt completely steady inside myself. Not because justice had come, but because I had chosen myself, my peace, my truth, my voice. I looked out across the yard and inhaled deeply. Then, to anyone listening then, now, or in their own battles, I offer this. If you've lived a story like mine, or survived a betrayal you never saw coming, share it. Your voice matters. Your survival matters. Your story matters. Always.